Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of RotoGrinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the YellaWood 500 at Talladega Superspeedway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Kansas, Ross Chastain took his first win of the season, giving him a win in each of his 3 years at Trackhouse Racing. He took the win over William Byron and in third place, Martin Truex Jr. So definitely an interesting race. There was, some issues for a couple playoff contenders. We saw Kyle Larson hitting the wall early after having a tire go down. We saw Austin Cindric finish 34th after having what looked to be a strong race. Chase Briscoe, Tyler Reddick with 24th and 25th place finishes as well. So definitely shook up the playoff picture a little bit, Stevie. But overall, what do you think of Kansas? I know it wasn't quite the Kansas we've seen in the past, but I thought still pretty good racing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the racing was good. I think there was a lot of stuff that was unpredictable that kind of messed the day up, betting wise. But I think overall, going into the week, I was very high on Toyota, and I think they were good. They weren't great. And Chevy had a lot of speed, which, was good to see. Not necessarily good for my bets, but good to see. Good for Ross Chastain. I like Ross. I think Ross is really good for the sport. So always happy to see him win. He's a fan favorite. You see the crowd get excited when you see Ross win. So I think that's great. And, huge weekend for Byron and Bell playoff-wise. Bell had a really consistent fast race car. Pit crew helped him out a ton, but he's plus 28, Blaney's plus 28, and Byron's plus 34. Those three guys are in the driver's seat here heading into two kind of wild card races with Talladega this week and Roval next week. So Larson had such a huge lead going into this round that he's still okay. But heading to Talladega, I think Kyle Larson wanted to be probably plus 35, plus 40, and he's not in that spot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, especially because Kyle Larson looked from practice to have one of the stronger cars. Really unfortunate for him to have had that tire issue and then end up hitting the wall and just kind of limping home to a 26th place finish. Even if he had just finished 6th, right, he'd have 20 more points. He'd be at 30-78, and he'd be sitting there 38 points to the good instead of just 18 points to the good. So I think you'd feel a lot better about that. But I agree with you. Great win for Ross Chastain. Love seeing him win. As you mentioned, he's great for the sport. William Byron finishing second. Of course, I had Byron 16-1 midweek. So little bummed out there that Byron didn't quite take that win. And honestly, Hendrick overall looked pretty good. Byron was strong. Elliott was strong. He just had to start from the back because he had that engine issue in practice. Bowman getting a top 10 finish was our victory lane pick. We hit that one. So overall, not a bad race at Kansas. Definitely an entertaining race for sure. But this week, we are on to Talladega. Talladega, of course, a super speedway, 2 2/3 miles long. The longest oval in NASCAR, highly banked, which means we produce some high speeds there. So to slow them down, we got to use the aero and engine packages to slow the cars down and create the draft. So Stevie, of course, Talladega, one of the two major super speedway drafting tracks. And then there's Atlanta as well, which is the 1.5 mile drafting track. Races a little bit differently, but I know this Talladega race in particular, Stevie, can be different from the 2 Daytona races and even the first Talladega race. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so this is a playoff race, Daytona, the final race, Daytona, it's, hey, win to get in kind of situation. We saw that with Harrison Burton. Those races are going to be a lot more aggressive. I think that, you're going to see a little bit of aggressiveness as far as like trying to get some stage points, but I don't know how aggressive we really get. If we look at the last 3 playoff races here, they have been aggressive, but not crazy. You look at it, Blaney won a race here. It was Chase Elliott and Bubba Wallace, I'm pretty sure, beat Keselowski, and Keselowski was in the playoffs in that situation, I think, in 2021. So crazy, no. Aggressive, a little bit. you're kind of betting on some of these playoff drivers to be a little bit more aggressive for stage points, which could lead to some potential issues. But overall, I think that there's a lot more give and take at this Talladega race than our other three super speedways we run throughout the year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely some more give and take at these Talladega races. For example, if you look at last year's Talladega race, I mean, we had 28 drivers finish on the lead lap. There were only 4 cautions in the race. And of course, 2 of those are stage cautions. And we're talking about a next-gen era Talladega race. Then the year before that, the playoff Talladega race, 27 cars finishing on the lead lap and 6 cautions. So not super chaotic, super frantic here for Talladega. But look, when it comes down to it at the end of the race, there'll still be drivers that want to win this. There will be playoff drivers that desperately need a win. There will be playoff drivers on the cut line that want to get the best finish they possibly can to put them in good position for the Roval next week. So it's still super speedway racing. We still could see some guys make some mistakes and take out a bunch of cars. And, obviously guys in these smaller teams, the ones that have been eliminated, they want to win. They want to get the best finish possible. They're probably not going to try to, push and shove, especially egregiously, knowing the playoff situation, but they're still going to try to get the best possible finish. And so it still is going to produce a bunch of randomness, still going to produce a bunch of, potentially surprise winners. And even if we look at last year, for example, that I was talking about, the first 3 drivers were all playoff drivers. So first, second, and third were all playoff drivers. But after that, in positions 4 through 13, were all non-playoff drivers. So it's not like it's just going to be playoff drivers finishing up front and things like that. We're still going to see the usual mix of drivers in and out of the playoffs, finishing toward the front and not. But one interesting stat, Stevie, playoff drivers have won 9 of the last 10 playoff Talladega races.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't shock me, right? And I know it doesn't really shock you either. I will say this, right? Like, you kind of expect a playoff driver to win because you expect them to be aggressive and try to run up front. But on the flip side to that, you look at money. Money is a huge thing in the sport. And obviously, there's been a lot of news come out over the last 24 hours about 23XI and Front Row. But you look at the money, and Denny Hamlin did a fantastic job of explaining like how much like even 2 or 3 spots mean as far as standings. Well, yeah. You look at where Stenhouse, Barry, Priest, Gregson, Gillen. You look at where all these teams are, and you're like, they're still kind of racing for stuff too. Because I mean, finishing 27th in points is a lot of money compared to finishing 19th. So I think that is something that we have to remember too, especially going to Talladega. The top 19 spots probably not going to change, but I mean, anywhere from Hochevar down to like a Daniel Hemrick is open game. So there's a lot of money still to be won, and teams are going to still take these races very seriously. And you got a guy like Stenhouse, and you got a guy like Gillen and Michael McDowell, who go to Talladega with the opportunity to win and gain a ton of points on these other drivers. So yeah, we do expect probably a playoff driver to win or run really close to winning. But, I mean, if Todd Gilliland or Noah Gragson or Ricky Stenhouse has an opportunity to win this race at the end of this race, I mean, Stenhouse is going to be aggressive to try to win. And sponsors. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to get a win for your sponsor. How big of a win was it for Ross Chastain with the win last weekend? Because that team, Kubota doesn't sponsor that car every week. That's a huge win for that sponsor and that team. So you have to remember all this too. And Talladega is still kind of a wild card. Yeah, we expect it to be a little bit calmer, but that doesn't mean you're not going to see like a McDowell pushing a Todd Gilliland 3 or 4 wide at the end of this race to try to win. Just because we think it'll be a little calmer doesn't mean that a non-playoff driver can't win.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned 21st and back, anything's kind of wide open. Well, in 20th is Kyle Busch. He hasn't won this year. He wants to get a win. And then 19th through 17th, they're all really close. And, finishing 17th, I believe, still comes with a huge bonus for being the first car in points that didn't make the playoffs. And then you have the drivers 16th through 13th, Burton, Keselowski, Truex, and Gibbs. They're eliminated, but they can still finish as high as 5th in the championship, even though they got eliminated in the first round. So still all to play for pretty much everybody out there. And you mentioned it, sponsors. So I think there's a lot going on here. Turning back to the playoff drivers, any playoff specific strategy we might see here at Talladega?
I mean, just your typical manufacturers teams working together. I feel like you're going to see a lot of tandem drafting where you see, 3 or 4 Hendrick cars potentially pushing each other, Joe Gibbs cars pushing each other, even drivers that are out of the playoffs. Like Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher have been two of the best pushers with the next gen car on speedways. Like if you're Penske, you're begging RFK to be helping you this weekend. I feel like so. I think more than anything, it's just, looking at manufacturers and teams working together like we typically do, just maybe in a even more aggressive kind of team working situation here. Like look at Tyler Reddick, Bubba, great speedway racer, but Tyler Reddick needs some points this weekend. He had a rough go. He's -4 to the cutoff line. So I expect like Bubba to be hooked up to Tyler Reddick most of the race this week.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially for stage points, right? You want to, if you're a Tyler Reddick, if you're a Daniel Suarez, you need stage points. Briscoe and Cindric, they'll probably try to get stage points, but they may be more like we're looking to win, which I think is interesting and part of some of my strategy this week. But if you're Joey Logano right on the cut line, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Denny Hamlin, even Kyle Larson, you're looking for stage points, right? You want to pad that lead, or if you're on the good side, or you want to try to gain as many stage points as possible to get back into the good side of the playoffs. If you're anywhere from, I would say, Daniel Suarez all the way through Kyle Larson, you're looking for as many stage points as possible. Christopher Bell, Ryan Blaney, they would love stage points. I think William Byron would like stage points too, but then we get to those three at the top and there's maybe a little bit of room to kind of take it easy. We have seen this in the past in this second to last race. We saw it at Daytona earlier this year with Martin Truex Jr. just riding around because all he needed to do was not have a horrible day, and he would have been fine. He would have been locked in going into Darlington. I think we could potentially see that from probably Byron, but maybe as far as Byron, Blaney, and Bell, where you just kind of take it easy and hope, things probably won't get too crazy in front of you, but just ride around, survive until stage 3, and then grab the best finish you can at the end of stage 3. I think that could be a strategy for those guys near the top. But any other final thoughts before we get into our picks?
No, and I mean, I'll have more thoughts when we go through the picks, and I know you will too. Sure. But I feel like we always have to say this: bankroll management is really important at a racetrack like Talladega. You're going to take a little bit more chances on long shots, but bankroll management, very important.
Absolutely agree with that. And, it's kind of like we said with Bristol, right? Don't go crazy with the bets. I think I only won one bet at Bristol, but it was enough to break me even because of my bankroll management there for Bristol. Hopefully, trying for something similar here. But it is time to dive into those bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Talladega. 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from me for each turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on the YellaWood 500 and dive into turn 1. All right, turn 1, Stevie, what do you got for your first pick? Looks like like you said, you're going a couple long shots here. Start us off with your long shot.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Stenhouse at 40-1 for a quarter unit here. Obviously, we talk about Ricky Stenhouse all the time on super speedways. We like his aggressiveness. He's changed the way that he races super speedways, which has given him even more opportunity to win these things. So for the first couple stages, Stenhouse has been sitting back and just in big time like fuel savings. And then the last pit stop, they are, way more aggressive. They're less, using less time on pit road. And it's put him in position to be in the race at the end, which is always something we're worried about with Stenhouse. And it's given him track position, which is what we need here when you're betting a guy at 40-1. So as much as we talk about like wanting drivers to be more aggressive and running up front, this whole new fuel saving strategy kind of thing has definitely thrown a little loop into running position and stuff. So I like how aggressive Stenhouse is. I like the fact that like he's going to go for it no matter what at the end of this race. He doesn't care who he pisses off. So I like Stenhouse here at 40-1 for a quarter unit.
Man, can you imagine if it was Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Kyle Busch coming to the line for the win at Talladega, because there's no love lost there, of course, between those two after the All-Star race. You know me. It's a super speedway. It's Ricky Stenhouse 40-1 or longer. I'm betting it. So right there with you. I honestly don't even add anything to add to that. It's my auto bet. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 40-1 at a super speedway. For my turn one pick, I don't have a specific pick, but look to fade William Byron. We talked about it just a little bit ago, on that intro there. Byron, I think, is the one who is in the best position to take the ride around and just accept what the race gives you strategy. So in group bets, where there's 4 cars and Byron's one of those, you almost could just bet the other 3 cars and feel like you're going to lock in a profit because he'll probably only finish in that 12 to 18 range. And it's almost surely one of those other cars is going to finish ahead of him. Now, it's not a guarantee. I'm not saying that's a strategy you should do, but if you're comfortable with that strategy, I think it is a profitable strategy. Also in head-to-head matchups, I've seen Bubba Wallace versus William Byron at plus money, plus 120, plus 110 now for Bubba Wallace versus William Byron. I really like that, especially knowing Bubba Wallace is going to be hooked up to Denny Hamlin, his car owner, and he's going to be hooked up to Tyler Reddick, who he knows needs a good finish in the playoffs. I think those two are going to try to tandem their way to the front at the end of this. And even if something happens to Reddick, Bubba Wallace, then he wants to win, right? He wants to grab a win on this season. He hasn't gotten a win. He knows this is one of his best chances to get a win, and Byron could just be riding around in those teens, the back half of the top 20, back portion of the top 20 there. So I think this is a good spot to fade William Byron. I like Kyle Busch even minus 115 versus William Byron, for example, because we all know Kyle Busch is going for a win here. So I think there's a good potential that William Byron takes it a little bit easy, even in stage 3. I think he especially takes it easy in stages 1 and 2. But even in stage 3, I think he probably tries to do the Denny Hamlin strategy from Atlanta. But now that he knows he's in a much more comfortable position than Hamlin was, I think, anything from like 12th to 20th place would be an acceptable finish for William Byron, which means I like fading him in some bets.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand this. He ran one of the best Talladega races we've ever seen last year. Finished second in each of the stages, finished second in the race, and just did it awesomely. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like, he ran such a great race. I wouldn't be shocked if he qualifies well to just kind of stay up front. Sure. But I mean, he definitely is going to be somebody. If it gets tense, he is going to back out of it. There's no reason for him to push anything right now. End of the race, way different story. But I mean, if the stages get a little crazy there and people are being really aggressive with their pushes, I expect William Byron to kind of bail out a little bit. So I completely understand
especially
your
with how
mindset.
good he is at the Roval, right? Like, he's so good at the Roval. You don't really fear any disaster there. He's led the most laps at the Roval twice, and in a separate Roval race, he finished second. He almost won. He probably would have won if Tyler Reddick hadn't accidentally punted him. It's just one of those spots where William Byron is coming into a track that's really good for him at the Roval. And yeah, I know there's a little bit of a change to the track, but it's only in one portion of the track there. So overall, William Byron should still be really good at the Roval. And I think this is a spot where he probably, like you said, if it gets a little crazy, he'll probably be the first to back out of it. And I think it could get a little aggressive towards the end of the race, which might cause Byron to be a little bit more cautious. So turn 1 picks, Stevie is on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 40-1, 4/4 unit. I'll be right there with him on that one. And I talked about some William Byron fades. So let's bump draft into turn 2. All right, Stevie, turn 2. We're going to a non-chartered driver. I know there's been a lot of discussions about charters this week, but we're going to a non-chartered driver for your turn 2 pick.
Yeah, we'll talk about that charter stuff off air, because I'm sure me and you could have a long talk about that. But I'm going to go to Anthony Alfredo here for a top 10 at plus 360. I'm going to do a half a unit on this one. And this is just, again, I don't expect this race to be as crazy as Daytona and Talladega throughout the regular season. But Anthony Alfredo has definitely had a little bit more experience now. We know that Beard Motorsports is a team that typically sits back. They don't go out there and they don't try to push it and, get into wrecks. They bring fast race cars with ECR engines, a lot of RCR help on those cars. So, I mean, just kind of looking at this one going, I like Beard Motorsports. I always like to bet Beard Motorsports cars. And I mean, this is a guy that Parker Retzloff just finished 7th at Daytona with the same car starting 29th. And I think Anthony Alfredo has just as much upside. He's going to run around and just kind of hang out. We know he's going to be there at the end of the race if there is a big one during the middle of the race. So I like his top 10 odds here. I like his opportunity because when you're riding around, you're saving fuel, which is definitely going to help you at the end of the race. He's not going to lose a lap typically by speed because the Beard Motorsport cars are fast enough. So, yeah, I mean, I like Alfredo. I like the Beard Motorsports cars, and I think this number, I would like it more at like 5-1, but I still bet it here at plus 360.
100% agree with you. Beard Motorsports and Anthony Alfredo, I think they're both great at super speedways. Obviously, we've seen so many different drivers have top 10 finishes. You just mentioned Parker Retzlaff in the mix for a potential win in the most recent super speedway race. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense where Beard Motorsports, you're pretty much looking to bet them top 10 anytime we come to super speedway. And especially with a driver like Anthony Alfredo, very experienced, has driven in the Cup Series full time before, and has been a long time in Xfinity, has had some very good super speedway results. So Anthony Alfredo top 10 plus 360, half a unit for Stevie's turn 2 pick. For my turn 2 pick, well, the bets aren't out yet, but we have seen, of course, every week qualifying bets get put up. So when qualifying bets are put up at a couple of these sports books that like to release them, look to bet on Front Row Motorsports and Team Penske, but especially Front Row Motorsports, right? Michael McDowell has won 4 straight super speedway pole positions, drafting track pole positions. If you say Atlanta, Talladega, and Daytona, he's won 4 straight. And then all the way back in Daytona, Joey Logano won. And of course, he's Penske, and there's this Penske Front Row Motorsports Alliance. So that alliance has won all 5 pole positions this year at drafting tracks. And, Joey Logano doesn't have that webbed glove anymore. Maybe that's what got him the pole at Daytona, because otherwise Michael McDowell would have won it. So Michael McDowell potentially could be looking at 5 straight poles if Joey Logano hadn't cheated that first pole there. So yeah, I mean, you got to bet Michael McDowell for pole. I don't care if it's 4-1. I don't care if it's 5-1. You have to bet Michael McDowell for the pole position. And then usually Todd Gilliland is in the teens or the 20s. You got to bet that because he keeps qualifying inside the top 3 or 5 at all of these. And, it could be this time he gets the good Front Row Motorsports, little bit better aerodynamics car. And of course, Team Penske is Team Penske. So I'll be looking to bet Front Row Motorsports pole position bets and potentially Team Penske pole position bets as well, depending on their odds. But, yeah, I don't have much more than that as far as qualifying, Stevie. It's probably going to be those guys, right?
So I am extremely high on Austin Cindric this week. I know it's not one of my bets for the show, but I'm very high on Austin Cindric this week. I really hope that it's him. So if you are doing this like Penske Front Row Motorsports, don't leave out Cindric. Even so, yeah, I mean, I'm very high on him, and don't be silly like Stevie at Daytona and bet all these qualifying bets and leave out McDowell because you were worried about Ford not bringing a good machine for him. So, I like this. I mean, it's kind of for forever. It was at the Daytona 500. We would always just bet Hendrick to win the pole. And now it's just gotten to the point where which Ford do we want to bet?
Yep, exactly. So Ford bets, but especially Penske and Front Row Motorsports. You occasionally can see a Stewart-Haas racing car pop up there as well. But that would be my turn. 2 pick is to keep an eye on those qualifying odds for those cars. So 2 turns down, 2 turns to go. We're going to push each other down the backstretch in a turn 3. All right, turn 3, Stevie. Another long shot bet, another driver that we both love at super speedways and that will both be on for this bet. Who is it?
Yeah, it's Eric Jones. I mean, at 60-1, absolutely love this. Bet a quarter unit on this. It's an auto bet for me, just like Stenhouse, Eric Jones, anytime he's 40 or better, I'm going to bet him at these super speedways. He's a really good super speedway racer. Kind of flies under the radar in that aspect of just how talented he is. I know it has been kind of an up and down type of season, but I mean, if we look at Talladega's last 5 races, he's finished sixth in 3 of those. His average running position is sixth best. So, yeah, I mean, overall, that's what we want. We want drivers that are going to run up front. It has been a season to forget for Eric Jones and this legacy group. They definitely expected way more out of this season. I mean, I know I expected way more. Eric Jones is 32nd in points. Like, had you told me that coming into the year, I would have told you you're probably crazy. So, what do they need? They need a win. I mean, more than anything else, this team needs a win. You know, they need a top 5 because they haven't had any top 5s this year. So, but you have to think Eric Jones is going to be more aggressive. Toyota has not been like the best, I feel like, for legacy, and like Joe Gibbs, like, so I don't know if Eric Jones would push a Joe Gibbs car to the win and not try to take this win for himself. So I like Eric Jones, if he's in the opportunity to win this race, to be selfish. I mean, you almost have to think he would be selfish because of the season that he's had.
Yeah, absolutely. You think he's got to be selfish, knowing it's been a struggle for Eric Jones. It's been a struggle for Legacy as a whole. And if you just look first, like Daytona versus Talladega, Eric Jones performs a little bit better at Talladega, even though he's been very good at both in the next gen car and in Legacy Motor Club. So, I think there's a reason to like him, especially here at Talladega. If you look, for example, at his average top 15 percentage, it's 46% at Daytona. But then if you come to Talladega in the next gen era, it's 54.5%. So 10% better. And if you throw in his other year at Legacy, those averages just differ even more, which wasn't, of course, in the next gen car, but in 2021, but was still his first year at Legacy Motor Club. So he has positive Talladega splits versus Daytona. So this is an especially good spot where I like to attack Eric Jones, knowing that he does have those Talladega splits. And I mean, like you said, his finishes are all pretty much very good. 9th, 6th at Talladega with Legacy. And then, of course, 27th and the 35th and last 2. But by and large, he's grabbing solid finishes here in the mix, leading laps. He's led 25 and 23 laps at Talladega before, even in 2021, before the next gen car in the first year with Legacy, which I guess then was petty, but I'm calling it Legacy. He grabbed a 7 laps led there. So, I think Eric Jones at Talladega is a guy I'm betting. Even at 40-1, I'm usually betting him. So 60-1 feels like a really nice gift. My turn 3 pick, I'm going to go to a guy I just talked about in turn 2, but that's Todd Gilliland of Front Row Motorsports, and I'm taking him for a top 5 finish at 8-1. Definitely think, you could bet his outright, things like that, but, maybe a little foreshadowing there. But Todd Gilliland, top 5 finish. I mean, this guy qualifies up front because of that Ford power. He's been running up front because of that Ford power and just being a very good super speedway racer overall, even when Ford wasn't quite as good maybe as Chevy and or Toyota. For example, in Gilliland's rookie year, he was still out there running up front in the Daytona 500. He was still out there fighting for race wins, leading laps. And so now that he's in a car that is capable of leading and dominating races, as he has already once this year led the most laps in a race, I think this is a spot where 8-1 for a top 5 finish is just far too long. I mean, this is a guy who's running in the top 5 constantly at super speedway races. Doesn't have the top 5 finish yet, which might be what is pushing these odds up towards 8-1, but he's always in the mix for a top 5 at these super speedway races. And it's just is a matter of time when you're constantly running up front like that to where you grab that top 5 finish.
So my number one value play in my model pre-qualifying is Todd Gilliland this week, across all his odds, and we'll talk about him even more later. But yeah, I mean, he's finished 13th or better in 4 straight Talladega races. My model absolutely loves him. He kind of runs in that like sweet spot where he has the upside to win the race, but he's not like being in a position where he's going to be in wrecks. And Talladega is a much wider racetrack. There's a lot more give and take at Talladega than there is at Daytona. and he has run very well at this racetrack compared to where he's, kind of finished at Daytona.
Yeah, reminds me a little bit of like Jamie McMurray, not when like super late career, but when Jamie McMurray was constantly winning at Talladega and at Daytona. McMurray was always in that sweet spot where he was running towards the front, had a chance to always grab these, and he wasn't kind of getting involved in those wrecks because he was running mid-pack and not causing the wrecks like he started to do a little bit later in his career as well, towards the very tail end. But yeah, a little bit of reminding me of Jamie McMurray, I guess, for Todd Gilliland there at Super Speedway races. So my turn 3 pick, Todd Gilliland, 8-1 for a top 5 finish. Stevie's 60-1, Eric Jones to win the race for a quarter unit. That means we got one turn left, and that's turn 4. All right, last turn, Stevie. You're going with another outright bet, but this time on one of the relative favorites.
Yeah, so I feel like we talked a lot about, like, is there a playoff driver? Should there be a playoff driver that wins this race? The odds definitely suggest a playoff driver wins, even though we like these longer bets. I'm going to go to Chase Elliott here at 16-1 for a half a unit. He's my favorite of the favorites. So you look at where Chase Elliott's run here, it's up towards the front, and he's finished really well here. This is a good opportunity for Chase to get locked in to the next round. And where he's at, he's only +4. He didn't have the best Kansas because, like we talked about, he had to come from the back, and he finished well. He had a fast race car, but he had to come from the back. He missed out on stage points, and it just kind of hurt his overall points day, and he didn't have a huge cushion going in. So Chase Elliott's going to be aggressive for these stage points. He's going to be running up front, I feel like, most of the day if he has the opportunity to. So, I mean, we look back to last year, he finished top 5 in stage 1, and then he finished 5th, right? Yeah, 5th in stage 2. So he's going to be aggressive for the stage points. He has the upside to win this race. He wasn't running for a championship last year. We go back here to 2022. Chase Elliott won this race. So, you look at where Chase runs, how aggressive Chase is. Hendrick is going to bring fast race cars this weekend. They always do at these super speedways. He has one of the highest driver ratings. I mean, he has the highest driver rating at the last 5 next-gen races here at Talladega. So, I mean, why not bet him at this number is kind of was my thought process. So I took Elliott 16-1. All my other outrights this week so far have been 20 or higher. But I think if I was going to bet a favorite, it was going to be Elliott, and that's what I ended up doing.
100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. If I bet a favorite, and I haven't bet this yet, Chase Elliott, but if I do bet a favorite, it is going to be Chase Elliott. 100%. You're on it. Jim Sonis is on it. I would be on it if and when I do bet a favorite. This is the one. I mean, it's Chase Elliott at a super speedway. You're discounting William Byron a little bit. So we know those are the 2 Hendrick guys that really shine at super speedway races, especially Talladega. And if we're discounting Byron, it's got to be Chase Elliott for me. We know Denny Hamlin has struggled a little bit in the next-gen style drafting. We know Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano are very good, but they're so much shorter in odds. I would rather just take the guy that's 16-1 instead of 12 or 13-1 because they all have about the same chance to win this. So, yeah, give me the extra little bit of odds there on Chase Elliott at 16-1. So, Stevie 16-1. Chase Elliott half a unit for his turn 4 pick. For my turn 4 pick, I am going to a longer shot here. It is a playoff driver, though, and I'm going to take Chase Briscoe at 44-1. Look, this guy probably needs to win. He is 25 points behind the cut line, and a lot of these guys, 25 points, and a lot of these guys, your Joey Logano's, your Chase Elliott's that we just talked about, Denny Hamlin, Alex Bowman, who are on the inside of the cut line, are very good. Super speedway racers are probably going to get some stage points. So he's going to have a tough time keeping up with them. So he has to win. And what does he have? He has 3 other teammates that are not in the playoffs that can all push him to the win. If some of these guys think bigger picture, I know they're all disbanding. I know Stuart Haas is disbanding after this. They're all going to different teams. But if some of these guys think bigger picture, what it'll mean for their team, potentially a team bonus at the end of the year, things like that, they'll do the smart thing and push Chase Briscoe to the win, especially somebody like a Ryan Preece who's looking to potentially stay in the Ford family. I think this is a spot where, if he's going to be a team player, for Chase Briscoe. And I know Chase Briscoe is going to Toyota next year, but I still think that right now you're a Ford driver, you're a Stewart-Haas Racing driver, and you're going to try to get your teammate a victory, or at least help him to a strong finish. And if he's in the mix for a strong finish there at the end, anything can happen. He could grab that win. Plus, we've seen him have some strong super speedway races. He has led the most laps at super speedways before, or led laps, I should say, at super speedways before. Led the most laps in Daytona, the 2023 second Daytona race there. He led the most laps at that race. So Chase Briscoe, a very capable super speedway driver, has a third place finish at Daytona in 2022 in the next gen car. Hasn't quite worked out at Talladega for him, but he's a guy that can put himself in position, a fourth place finish in the first Talladega race last year. So give me Chase Briscoe 44-1. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to try to get a win here to secure himself into that round of 8.
Yeah, I mean, he has Ford help. He has all of the other Stewart-Haas cars behind him. I mean, I'm still not certain that Noah Gragson would push anybody to a win.
Right.
But
that's why I said Ryan Preece.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if Ryan Preece would push him to the win, but I think with this car, if he has the opportunity where he is leading off turn 4, so hard to pass with this car. So I think that with the opportunity, Chase Briscoe at 44-1 makes a lot of sense. Again, it's a whole organization behind him. He's going to have a fast race car. I expect him to qualify well because of it's, again, a whole organization working with him. He's qualified well with the next-gen car. He has a pole with the next-gen car on a super speedway. He started inside the top 5 multiple times. He just started 6th in our last super speedway race, 5 top 15s in the last 7 super speedway races. So the opportunity for Briscoe is definitely there. And again, you're betting on a whole organization behind one car.
Absolutely. So Chase Briscoe 44-1, my turn 4 pick, and Chase Elliott 16-1 is Stevie's turn 4 pick. So we have completed a lap at Talladega. Only one thing left to do, drive in victory lane. And I love this one, Stevie. I talked about him earlier. What do we got for victory lane?
Yeah, we got Todd Gilliland at 55-1 to win this race. I bet a quarter of a unit on this one. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love this. Kind of talked about it a few minutes ago with your top 5 bet for him. He's been fast. He's going to qualify well. It's been a rough year for Front Row Motorsports. They're obviously not in the mix to win anything important, but I mean, again, a lot of money to be exchanged as far as this group of drivers. And I think Todd Gilliland locked in for next year. If he could go out and get this win, it would be huge for him, huge for this team. And I don't expect him to, somewhat play fair to anybody. I mean, this is another guy I think that is going to be aggressive and selfish. I mean, he finished 7th in 2022 here. He finished 12th here last year in these 2 playoff races. He's had the opportunities. He's there at the end of these races. And Front Row Motorsports has really fast race cars on super speedways this year. Between Ford and Yates and what they're doing, this isn't a tier 3 team anymore. They have definitely stepped up their game. And I mean, I like Todd Gilliland. It's definitely time for another first-time winner. And I hope it's Todd, because I think this kid is really just down-to-earth, talented, and just always, every time I've ever talked to Todd, he's been super nice. So I'm rooting for him. I want to see him win this race.
Me too, man. Todd Gilliland is my favorite NASCAR Cup Series driver. So I'm rooting for him. I love 55-1. I don't have anything else to add. I already talked about him in the other turn there. So Todd Gilliland 55-1 to win our victory lane pick here on Running Hot for Talladega. So that will do it for us. Thanks for listening to the YellaWood 500 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's Motorsports Betting Podcast. We'll be back next week as we talk bets for the Bank of America Roval at the Charlotte Motor Speedway Roval. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.